Hello and welcome to another edition of PTTP Paranormal UnCut. Thank you for everyone that's coming in. Let us know that you're there by saying hello. But tonight we are joined by another great guest, Sam Baltrusis. He's an author, investigator, researcher, TV personality, and he's covered some really dark stories over the years. And one of the ones that I'm keen to have a chat with him about is the Curse of Lizzie Borden. I think a lot of us have seen the documentaries, and there was even a movie out about it. So we're definitely going to get on that and have a good old chat with Sam about it. Before I bring him on, again, any questions that you guys want to ask, please drop them in the chat and we will try and ask Sam. But what I'm going to do is bring him on and then I'll say a few hellos and then we'll kick off this show and find out more about Sam. So let's bring him on. Hey Sam, thank you very much for joining us this evening. How are you doing?
Doing well.
Good. Again, thank you so much. Really excited about having a chat with you about your journey into the paranormal, the stuff that you've done, and you've covered quite some of the darker side of the stories as well, like the Lizzie Borden, the Curse of Lizzie Borden. But what I want to do is just jump back before all that, and just like, how did your journey start into the paranormal? Was it something you've seen on TV, or something personal in your life that's sort of drawn you into this?
So when I was a kid, I had an encounter with my grandfather. Would visit me when I was younger. So I would have conversations with my grandfather, and then things started getting progressively darker for me when I was a child. And when I say darker, just like the darker entities started kind of presenting themselves to me. And I had one experience with a man wearing a hat with red glowing eyes when I was around like between 8 and 9, that period. And it just really, it freaked me out. So I ended up putting up paranormal blinders for many years and completely stayed away from the paranormal. It terrified me. And then I was a journalist for 20 years, and the journalism turned into me writing stories, how like kind of paranormal themed stories every Halloween. And then I wrote a story for a local magazine called Stuff Magazine, and that turned into my first book, Ghosts of Boston, and I haven't looked back since.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. Before we jump into the next question, I just want to say a few hellos. Hey, Nick. Hey, Abby. Hey, Dan. Hope you're all doing well. And again, thank you for joining in. So from going to journalism, you've gone into the paranormal. As you've got older, because when you're quite young, our imaginations are quite wild.
Yeah.
But growing up and doing your research into the paranormal, what do you remember, like your first case that you started looking at as you were getting yourself into the paranormal? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so I really, when I first went into the paranormal, I was really wary about losing my credibility as a journalist.
Mm.
So I use the word allegedly a lot, like when I would write my books. I'm like, the allegedly haunted location. So my first book was Ghosts of Boston, and I really focused just on Boston. When I write my books, I immerse myself in the location, and at the time, I was giving tours in Boston and interviewing people like I do as a journalist. So I would interview experts in the field, and then as I'm book number 18 now, so things have kind of progressed over the years. But really, at the time, I wasn't technically. I was investigating, but investigating in the sense that it wasn't part of my book. It would just kind of happen as I was doing my research. And my first, I mean, case, if you will. I was living in a Victorian house that was haunted for my first book, and in fact, the spirit of the house was, we called her the seamstress, and she was a big part of my first book in the sense that I felt like she was with me while I was writing the book. And things would happen along the way. And I did allude to it or mention it in my first book, but I was worried about my credibility, so I didn't really talk about having. I had one situation where I was right, and I lived on the second floor, and there's a staircase that looked down to the first floor. And I remember looking out, like coming out of my room, as I was writing a part of my book, and seeing what looked like a woman wearing a nightgown, and
Wow.
crossing in front of the staircase and going into what was a closet, really. So she was kind of walking by, and I'm like, oh my god, like this place really is haunted. So that was my first case. And my friend Andrew Warburton, who actually my British friend, he and I kind of, at the time, it was fun, but it got, as I progressed, I'm now I would say expert level when it comes to investigating. But at the time, it was kind of fun, but also very dangerous at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And you were saying about like the journey, and what I find quite interesting, you were worried about your credibility, being going down in the journalism. What do you think may, because by the looks of it, you've done remarkably well, your 18th book. What do you think people's perception have changed of the paranormal? Is it because there's been more counters with spirits that people are starting to realize it is actually real? What do you think, when people start to realize what you're all about, what why do you think people have changed their opinions of the paranormal all of a sudden? Because it's quite open now, but back in the day it was, shall we say, like a taboo subject. A lot of people would not believe in it. So where do you think the change has come along?
I mean, I think pop culture had a huge role in the sort of the shift to the acceptance. I remember, like, when I first wrote my first book, Ghost of Boston. If I would lecture, it was very much like people wanting to like debunk the idea that ghosts actually exist.
Mm.
And I remember, like, my first book. I mean, like, it was almost like ghost porn. Like, people, they wanted my copy. They wanted my book, but they wanted it in like a brown paper bag, and I'm like, okay. So that's changed dramatically. I mean, like, now people, like, I've seen people. I was on a plane, recently, and the lady in front of me was reading one of my books, and I'm like, this, and there was someone's like, you didn't say like, hey, that's my book. I'm like, no, I felt weird, like just going. But now people are open with my books. I will say that, so my books versus sort of like what I do in investigations and on TV are different, because I try to still maintain objectivity in my books. So I do try to balance things out. I do feature people that are viewed as skeptics, or they challenge. Critical thinking is important, I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and
definitely.
so I try to present those people along with people like myself, because I'm a hardcore believer. I've had a lot of experiences, so the kind of having that balance in my books.
It definitely is good to have the balance there where you have people that don't believe, because then you can sort of, when something paranormal happens, or you think something paranormal happens, you get that excitement, don't you? That, okay, we've got a bit of evidence, but you need someone to ground you a little bit and say, well, let's have a look around at the elements. There's something causing that to happen. But with your investigations, you say that you step away from being an author and your investigations are different. What mindset, or how do you investigate them when you go to these locations, or what? Yeah, when you're out investigating for yourself, how do you do it yourself?
So, I mean, I definitely use my mediumship. So I identify as a clairvoyant. And when I write my books, I do, sometimes I allude to it, but I really try my best to, um, you know, not go there, I guess, and sort of like present the facts and interview other people as opposed. But I do have in my introductions of my books, I do give my perspective, so
Yeah,
that kind of seeps into my introduction. But as far as like my style, that's changed. Like when I first started, I was really relying heavily on equipment, and I find for me it just doesn't feel like spirit communication. So I started shifting to using things that to me felt like I was communicating with spirit, like the Estes method.
yeah.
I'm a big user in that. I'm a dowsing rod person, so I'll use my dowsing rods to, to kind of
Mhm.
like I guess go into alpha state. Like
Yeah.
spirits, are you in the room, and that kind of thing. And I use tarot cards too. So like I started off using mediumship tools, like using those tools out in the field, and it worked for me.
Well, that's brilliant. But when it comes to equipment, do you think the equipment works just as well as where you do it? Like, I understand that you use your mediumship equipment, like the dowsing rods and things. But what's your perspective, or what's your thoughts when you think of all the equipment that's suddenly coming out, the word banks, and do you think they work in the paranormal, or do you think there's a better way of investigation without
So
them?
I I mean, like again, like I like certain things. Like I have a dead bell that I love, and I love my dead bell. And I mean, Ron and Lourdes, we talked about them before we came on. I love investigating with them because they'll have the white noise.
Yeah,
It was formerly called Static Comet. It's the Digital Seance Initiative, called now. And I love working with them because what will happen is they'll set up, and then I'll be doing my mediumship, and I do what I call a seance. So it's a seance coupled, kind of like toned down seance that I do.
yeah.
And then so working in tandem with something like Ron and Lourdes validates what I'm picking up. And so that to me, like, yes, I like having the validation. I just I just sometimes I feel like you'll have like people bringing in spirit boxes, etc., and it just doesn't feel like that I'm communicating with spirit. But what I do like though is me communicating with spirit, and then the tools that are used validates what I'm picking up.
What you're picking up. No, that's great. Um, and then moving into, like, back into your books that you've written, and you even did a TV show, The Curse of Lizzie Borden.
Yeah.
And that was one of the, I've seen the film, I've read stuff online, and there's a lot of different things said about Lizzie. Firstly, there's stuff about her sexuality, all sorts of things. But in 1892, that's when she was, when her parents were murdered. She was arrested, and initially, after going through court, she was acquitted of the murders. In your opinion, because do you believe that she did murder her parents, or where's your stance with that? Because it's still very much, it's still a cold case now, isn't it? But people have their theories and opinions. What's yours when it comes to Lizzie?
So it's one of those things that it's a complicated. So if you watch Curse of Lizzie Borden, the idea is almost like to exonerate her.
Yeah.
For those that haven't seen it, Lizzie actually is my distant cousin, and that's something that came up through my mother did the research through Ancestry.com. So I feel very connected to her and to her spirit and her legacy. So a part of me, like going in, I had a sort of a caricature. Idea of, I mean, like she was a cold-blooded murderer, and it wasn't a well-rounded take on my distant cousin. And when I found out I was related to her, I'm like, I'm on a mission to really find out who she was as a person. And so I started connecting to her and to her story. If you look at just the facts, 99% sure she did commit the murders. But I will tell you that having investigated that, not only with Curse of Lizzie Borden, but before that and after, things that presented itself, like, for example, one of the producers asked me to ask Lizzie if she killed her father and stepmother. And I was doing EVP. Lizzie, did you kill your father and stepmother? And there was this blood-curdling scream, like, stop asking me that question. And I feel her pain. I get asked that question every podcast that I'm on. Did she commit the murder? And truthfully, I mean, physically, I think that she did. But if you watch the documentary, we really present the case that there was something else, that she was under the influence of an outside entity. And
Yeah, that's
I really do believe that. I really think that either, whether you can cite dissociative disorder, which is what some people think was going on, she doesn't claim responsibility for the murders, and I don't think that she did even when she was alive. So I want to respect what she has told me, and so, but if you look at the facts, it does appear that she's the only one that could have committed those murders.
yeah, that's it. But again, a lot of people have said different things, and where you've got that connection and you've been there, and do you believe then if it was her that committed the murders, then do you think it was down to like she was possessed by some kind of evil entity that made her do it, or was there something going on within the household that there was the relationship with her father was a bit strained? And what do you think about that part of the story then? So if we think of her as the murderer, what caused her to do it, do you think?
I mean, there's a lot of speculation. I even came in thinking that she, sort of the idea that maybe she, it was like her orientation. She was kind of holding that back, and she just exploded or snapped. I thought about sexual abuse. I mean, like the situation, the setup of the house was very odd. Andrew's room was connected to Lizzie. So, and even during investigations, we picked up that there was sexual abuse. So, I mean, that's enough. That alone is enough to kind of like disassociate and to, have a different personality that would come out and explode, which is what I felt like that happened. But then there's the idea. So the Curse Lizzie Borden looked at the idea that our family lineage has multiple things that happen that are tied to various murderers and those who have been murdered. And so that's the angle that I went, that maybe there's like a family curse, that there's something that has followed us. And, the curse could be alcoholism, or it could be, like there's something else going on. But I do feel that with Lizzie, with that situation especially, that there was something going on the land. And if you look at next door, and this is in the documentary as well, Eliza Borden, who I channeled on while filming the documentary, killed her children. And this was years before, and it was right next door. And so as a paranormal investigator, I wanted to look at the idea that maybe there's something on the land, or maybe something tied to the family lineage that perhaps stalked us, or was sort of responsible. I had a recurring dream that happened over and over again, and it was replaying the murder. This is before I really even knew the case. Like, this is years ago, and it was like a black and white movie. I saw the wallpaper, and to me, the wallpaper was very significant, because when I walked into the house the first time, I knew that wallpaper. It was in my dream, and it's the same wallpaper. And I'm in the dream. I see what looks like a man lounging on a couch, and a woman standing behind him. But the woman is holding a hatchet behind her, and behind her is a man wearing a kind of like a hat. Right behind her, he looks menacing, and there's subtitles, black and white film that's kind of projecting. He has a mustache, and it says "Diablo did it." And for me, like, that was significant. I don't take my dreams literally. Like, it's coded for some reason, but I took it as that there was something else going on.
Mm. No, definitely. And, years have gone by. The Lizzie Borden house is still there. It's part of a B&B, I believe, and a museum. But going to the property now, what's the sort of feel when you walk into it, like as a normal day? Is it still got like an eerie factor to it that you feel that there's something not right with the property, or how would you describe it to this day?
So for many years, I investigated the location, and I was friends with the previous owner, and she was lovely. She actually passed away right after filming Curse of Lizzie Borden. So my relationship with the new owners, I don't really know them very well, and
No.
they've been cordial to me. But I have gone back since. But I told my distant cousin after filming, I will never call you back to this house again. And I made that promise to her, and I have it. So is it still eerie? I mean, a lot of what we did, as in me, Dave Schrader, and Chris Fleming, I felt like that we were there for a reason at that time. This was a change, a shift in the location. And if you go there now, it's almost like Disney World it's turning the murders into like it's sensationalizing the murders. And I'm not very happy with the new owners, with what they've done with this case and with it. But however, people do go there, and they still flock to it, and are still fascinated with the murders. But it's almost out of protest and out of respect
Yeah.
for my cousin.
No, no, definitely. And the other things that I was researching about Lizzie Borden, the house itself, is that there's still a lot of sightings of Andrew walking the building still. And I believe his wife, the stepmom, wasn't it? Abby, was it right? Her name?
Abby's right.
Do you think they're stuck because of the way their lives ended? Do you believe, and this could be with any spirits now that we're talking, do you think they get grounded to those places when it's a sudden death like that? Or why do you think their spirits still remain in these locations?
I personally, having spent a lot of time investigating that location and doing the TV show, I feel like that certain entities take the role of Abby and Lizzie, and I think that what would be considered like original ghosts, I think that they have crossed over to light many years ago. I do feel like that because it's investigated every day, things have been created, almost like thought form manifestations that assume the role of Lizzie, assume the role of Andrew. Andrew is presented as almost like a really bad man, and in life he probably was based on that. But it was also 1892 was a different time, and I think that back in 1892, he was a penny pincher. He had a weird relationship with his daughters, but I also think that he's almost been demonized by investigations, and I think he's almost presented like an entity, if you will, and not a real person. And yet we have to remember he was brutally murdered, and when we do the investigation, we have to be respectful of that he was a person that was brutally murdered, potentially by his own daughter.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Um, and when we're talking about evil, like moving into the darker side of the paranormal, one thing that's very common when you watch a lot of stuff on YouTube, TV shows as well, a lot of the times they refer to these demonic entities, and there's a number of different wordings for these demonic entities. Do you believe in spirits that are not actually spirits, that something demonic, like, do they really exist, and do they come through portals? Where's your views on when we look
I
at the dark side of it?
Using the D word, the demonic word for an entity is totally not what I'm about.
Mm.
So I personally don't think what we're interacting are demonic entities, but YouTube does, and so the television shows do as well. But I
Yeah.
do feel that sometimes what's presented. So, for my theory, really, with specifically with Lizzie Borden, I believe in like splinters, almost like parts of a person's soul has psychically imprinted itself at the location. So, when I'm interacting with Lizzie Borden at the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast, am I interacting with Lizzie, or am I interacting with a splinter of Lizzie, almost like a soul fragment that psychically imprinted itself at the house? And
Yeah.
that's possible too. Same with Andrew. Like, I don't think I'm interacting with Andrew, but maybe just a piece of him that's imprinted itself there. So I personally don't believe in using the word D. I think by saying that, it actually, the demonic word, because I feel like it perpetuates that, and it perpetuates it in YouTube shows over and over again. And I think that that is, as a paranormal researcher, like, that's wrong.
Yeah. No, no, because that's the problem. I find it quite. People jump onto demonic entity, and it gives the viewers, shall we say, the wrong impression of the
Yeah,
paranormal. Because a lot of
absolutely.
people say it's evil, it's going to do this to you, it's going to do that to you. But you know what? Like my wife, for example, she says to me, if a spirit was bad in life, it's most probably crossed over and bad spirit. Like it's just the same person, or maybe the way people go in and investigate, they get the wrong reaction. If you're disrespectful,
Right.
you know, that's why you're getting that angry sort of response. Would you agree with that?
I do, but I also feel like that there's other factors as well. So you have locations like the Lizzie Borden house. I feel like that because it's investigated over and over again, we're getting other things that have been brought in. So baggage from other investigators, stuff that may be conjured, elemental energy. I mean, this is on the outskirts of the Bridgewater Triangle. So there's other things that may be going on there that have nothing to do with the murders in 1892.
No, definitely. And then moving on as well. Well, wait. Well, before I go on, I will ask Nick's question. He's just said, "Can you over investigate certain locations? Like, is it too many times that it actually affects your investigation?"
Yeah, I mean, I strongly believe that certain locations are over investigated. And like I said, what happens is it by over investigating, like doing a daily investigation, it stirs the pot. It creates other manifestations like egregores and thought forms, and people drop off their baggage. So I do feel, I mean, the Lizzie Borden house is a perfect example. I will say this though, when we did the documentary, it was during COVID, so things were different. They were different in the sense that there was not an investigation every night for several years. So the spirits, I feel like, almost emerged during our investigation because it was dormant for so long. So
Mm.
yeah, I think let it settle. Like let the spirits kind of have some space, and I think that that's what I would recommend. I mean, I know it's a business for some people, but I also feel that things places can be over investigated. Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, that's great. Your response to that. I think Rob's just asked: is there any truth that I don't know if Seth Borden is related to Lizzie, like he
Yeah,
claimed on Sam and Colby.
yeah,
Do- Can
he
you?
actually is, and so we're also related. I mean, distantly related as
Yeah,
well. And he has the name. I don't, but my family, my connector is Innocent Cornell Borden, and she's the one that connects other people as well. So we have not only do we have Lizzie Borden, but Lizzie Borden's related to Eileen Warnos, who was a killer in Florida. She's also related to Marilyn Monroe, which we were able to
wow.
yeah, for like that's through we didn't know Marilyn's biological father. She didn't know her biological father, but through for forensic genealogy, we're able to connect Marilyn to Charles Gifford her as her biological father, who connects her to Lizzie and to myself.
Wow, that's amazing, and that must have blown your mind when you found out that you were distantly related to such a famous story and a person
Yeah,
that's, you know,
I
still
mean,
to this day people were talking about it.
It's a burden and a curse. I mean, I strongly. So my mother did the research, and people like, are you? And it's almost like too good to be true. But I'll tell you, my whole life has been serendipitous. Like I'm not from New England. I actually originally from Florida and moved up here in the '90s for college. I've always been drawn to the Lizzie Borden case and also the Salem witch trials, and I don't know why, but I was. And it turns out that I'm related to some of the players. And that was shocking. My mother, who, I mean, she does know what I do, but it kind of happened serendipitously. And so, but it also makes my life make complete sense.
Mm, definitely. And then moving on to Salem as well, because you did the Ghosts of Salem. Um, and again, something that interests me, and I looked into it. This dates back to, I believe, if I've got my dates right, 1662 of the first witch.
1692. Yeah,
1692. I knew.
actually significant because it's 1892 is also when the murders happened, the Lizzie Borden
Yeah,
murders. So 200 years separating.
and yeah, so Salem, when you think of Salem, you think about the witches, voodoo, and things like that. But where did you start your story from? Was there a particular case that you looked at that started your book of Ghosts of Salem?
So I wrote Ghost of Boston. My second book was Ghost of Cambridge, and my publisher really, really wanted me to write a book on Salem. And this is back many years ago. This is like well, not many, but 2012, I think, was like when they approached me. And at the time, there was not a lot written about the ghost of Salem. And I'm like, okay, so there's been a lot of books on Salem. The fact that there hasn't been a updated book on the ghost of Salem, I'll do it. So when I do my books, I immerse myself at the location. I started giving tours in Salem. I did paranormal investigation tours in Salem for a while, and also I gave historical tours at various properties over the years. So I just really, really immersed myself in Salem, which is very close to where I live. So just going there, and I've always been really fascinated with the witch trials, but my perception of the witch trials really came from Arthur Miller's The Crucible, and so it was a lot to the myths and misconceptions. There's a lot of myths and misconceptions. So really getting to the truth of the matter was important for me as a journalist and as a historian. So that Ghost of Salem was me kind of like untangling the myths and misconceptions, and then as I immersed myself more and more things happen. So that it's organically happened. So cases were it's more me writing about specific locations and going there and spending a lot of time there, and things started not magically happen, but things started to happen.
And I was going to ask, with your book, you're saying about your mediumship and identifying as clairvoyant. Do you think when you're writing your books, you're sort of getting guided by certain spirits of the stories that you're writing? Because like you said, you were drawn to Salem. Do you think something in the spirit world was pushing you towards Salem to write this book and guiding you when you're writing these sort of books?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when I write my books, especially in Salem, I feel like that. I mean, our spirits. Like, I think in my first book, definitely the seamstress, she was almost like with me while I was writing my book. But I think when it comes to Salem specifically, I let the spirits guide me. So, like even like Bridget Bishop, I have a relationship with her. She's the first woman to be accused, and actually the first to be executed for witchcraft, and she was the only one that was executed by herself in Salem. And I feel like she's kind of a sassy woman, and really knowing the who she was as a person, I was important to me. So, and same with Lizzie Borden, I wanted to know who Lizzie was as a person. And so when I say let the spirits guide me, I try my best to get to know them. I talk to them, like I'm like, hey Bridget, how's it going? I talk to them like they're like my friends. And so I feel really close to the spirits of Salem. But as things have progressed, it got progressively darker. I worked at a hotel, the overnight shifts in Salem, and while I was working at the hotel, I had an experience with the man with a hat, and I don't think it was the Hat Man, but it was a man with a hat. And this happened. It was like a kind of gradual reveal, if you will. And I do feel that this man with a hat actually is a family member. And this
Okay.
is right around the time when my mother discovered not only are we related to Lizzie Borden, but also the Putnam family and the Salem witch trials. And it may seem crazy that this is all tied, but it's actually not, because this is New England, and there was like back in 1600s, a lot of people were a lot of the people from the 1600s are actually were related, because it was so few people. So
Mm.
I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense. And also, you'll get a lot of people that grew up in New England that have ties to it as well. They just don't know it yet.
Wow, that's amazing. And what a great way to find out you're related to some really famous people. Well, paranormal stuff is, well, like
Yeah,
you said, it's great, and it's a bit of a curse at the same time.
it is a
Um,
curse. Yeah, it really is.
Nick's also asked, and I think this sort of goes back to what we're talking about. Would the spirits welcome or connect better if they know you are related to them in any when you're doing the investigation? So,
Yeah.
and that, I think you were saying earlier on, you felt that connection, especially with Lizzie, because you knew there was a connection there. Do you think you got more information because of that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I really, I mean, I feel like, especially with Lisbeth. I mean, I call her Lisbeth because that was her preferred name. And so I'm like, when I'm doing the TV show, I'm like, Lizzie, did you kill your father and stepmother? Because that's what people know her by. But when I talk to her like like a cousin, I'm like, Lisbeth, what do you think? And so I view them as my relatives, like me talking to a loved one.
Mm,
And so it changed, like, my investigation, especially with Salem and also with Lizzie Borden. It changed. It was more empathetic, and I do feel like that it did result in more. That empathy resulted in more. Like I had a stronger connection to them because I let them know that I was family. I don't think it's makes me special. I just think it makes me like I'm still living. I can tell their story and tell their story correctly.
yeah, because there were, going back to Lizzie Borden, I know there was a film that they released as well, which sort of highlighted her as the murderer, and they gave their opinion. What's your thoughts about the film that came? Have you seen the film, or
I mean,
have you
there have
not?
been multiple films that have done it, and I feel like there's different theories. Like there was the one that really interested me was when Chloe Sevigny and then Kristen Stewart, where they were like lesbian lovers, and like and that. I mean, that's, to be honest with you, I've always suspected that, but. I mean, and I couldn't believe they went there with it. But the thing is, as a historian and as a journalist, there's no factual proof that there was a love affair going on with Bridget Sullivan and Lisbeth or Lizzie. Uh, but it makes a great movie. And also in the movie they worked together. And
Yeah.
so the reason why there was no blood on Lizzie's dress was because she stripped naked, and that's a theory. That's been a theory that's I've heard before. So I do think. I mean, I thought that was a really interesting approach, and I've thought that I'm like this is. I've played out a lot of scenarios, and like
Yeah.
that was one of the scenarios actually. And so, I thought it was interesting, but I also think that if you look at the facts, that it's almost like a false narrative, and you want to be careful not to perpetuate false narratives, especially when you're writing books. I mean, you want to make sure that you get the facts correct.
Because with those sort of things, so with the sexuality part, there's no proven fact that there was a sexual relationship between the two girls then. But do
Right.
you think people look into that and then they go investigate, and because that's there, do you think they're getting false responses then because they've watched the film or they've read what's online? Do you think that has an impact on people's investigations then, because people go in there with the wrong perception because they think, based on what they've read or what they've seen on TV, that's what they're looking for, and so essentially they're asking the wrong questions then?
I do, but I've gone on so many investigations, and I will say that the thing that comes up, and I, having investigated in the past, I the people that the previous owners and the tour guides, if you did mention that, Lizzie, were you a lesbian? If you did say that, like, they were very much like, they'll quickly tell you like that's not proven. Not that they had any like shame. It's just like I feel like that was part of the vibe of the previous owner. They were really big about making sure that the history was told and told correctly. I'm not sure now. I'm not sure if things have kind of gone there, but I never had it where that was part of the investigation. To be honest with you, I will say the sexual abuse, that is something that a lot of people thought, and it did come up in the investigation, but I didn't. I personally hadn't seen that explored, except for, well, it was explored on Ghost Adventures. That's the show where it was talked about. But I also feel that that's so. But I do believe if you go in with a sort of like the power of suggestion, the power of suggestion can also skew your investigation.
No, definitely. Brilliant. And then moving on, you've not just done these locations. Are there any other locations that you've done over the years that really stand out to you? Like, do you that you've had an experience in that you can share with us as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've investigated all over the country. So I mean, for me personally, like those cases, like Salem and Lizzie Borden in New England are what I'm known for. But like locations that I've had profound experiences. I was at Broadhead Manor in Wisconsin last year, and that was amazing because it was more like Native American elemental energies that were on the property. And I think a lot of times when people say demonic entities, they're often miscategorized. They're elemental energies that are being miscategorized as demonic. And I was experiencing elemental energies, and it was amazing. Actually, it was a very profound investigation. It was an old schoolhouse, but it was also built on an area that the train tracks actually went through Native American burials, and so you could feel the Native American energy on the property, and connecting with those spirits was beautiful. So Broadhead Manor was one of those locations. I did a thing I called Year of Fear, where I went to the locations that I guess creep me out the most. That ones that I said will never go to, like Hinsdale House in New York, the Sally House in Kansas, and the Conjuring House. And the Conjuring House is another example of a location that probably was very haunted, but not I think a lot of people came in with sort of like the idea that the Conjuring House was, Bathsheba because of the movie, because of the Conjuring franchise. And I feel like that perpetuated a lot of responses that were, and the truth is Bathsheba was probably even never in that house, and she wasn't a witch. So I do think that pop culture's representation of the spirit of stories and of the spirit realm does skew investigators. But I mean, for me, I love going to locations that haven't been over investigated, and I try my best to go in cold as a medium. I don't want to know the backstory. The Conjuring House, you kind of have to know it because it was a movie that I watched, but the truth is, the movie was fiction. It was based on a true story. But what I encountered at the Conjuring House is very different than the movie.
Yeah, because even I think we spoke this a while ago. We even spoke to Andrea Parron, who
Yeah,
lived at the Conjuring House, and her take on the movie was actually a lot different to what happened in real life when they lived there. You know,
absolutely. Yeah.
and it's but things with the Conjuring House, it seems like there's a lot of going on. Like the owner of it now seems to be really affected. Like, you know, is that house as dangerous as what they say, or is it just people overacting that about the house then?
I've investigated the house multiple times. I was terrified of the location. For me, what I felt was kind of like the Lizzie Borden house. I think it's something on the land. I think what people interpret as evil or demonic actually is elemental in nature. So I think that there's elemental energies on the property. I think that if you mess with them, they're going to retaliate, and I think that that's what I've seen. Do I think that what's there can take over people? I do. I have worked with the current owner who and I don't want to get too much in the controversy but I saw her New Year's Eve, like not this past year, but I worked with her several times, and truthfully, like it's not the same person. And I was a producer for a TV show called A Haunting, and I was also on A Haunting. And one of the cases that I was looking into for the show was one of the previous caretakers was also taken over. And this is while the Heinzens owned the property. And it was shot down because the owner said that that wasn't true. But the person, his name's John Huntington, really exhibited what I would say is an attachment. I do think the possibility that the current owner is under the influence is very possible, but people quickly shoot it down because they're like, no, she's just crazy. But I'm like, the person that I met actually wasn't, and she was a very grounded person that may have dabbled into something that she shouldn't have dabbled into.
And that's the thing, because again, a lot of the stories, especially with the Conjuring House over the last, I would say, 6 months, there's been a lot of stuff about the Conjuring House.
Yeah,
And I always try and look at it, well, look at the stories behind it. Could something be affecting her mental state for
yeah.
her to react like it? But people, again, very quick to have different opinions. And I think it's just, if you're not there and you're not seeing what's actually happening, how can you have such strong opinions? It's great. There's still someone that's living in the house that's, you know, infamous for a lot of wrongdoings in that house because of these entities. And it was just because I know you've been there, it'd be great to get an insider's point of view of what you think, which is
Well,
great.
I mean, having had an attachment myself, I know what that looks like, and
Wow.
I do feel so. I've been sober for 15 years, but when you couple a really low vibration and a potential attachment coupled with alcohol, it's a deadly mix. And
Wow.
so I really feel that in her situation, I mean, I'm not a therapist, but I feel like there definitely low vibration stuff going on. But again, the person that I met was, I mean, she was a completely different person than what's being presented currently. And so I do question the idea that maybe there's something else going on.
No, definitely. Brilliant. Nick's just asked as well, where in Britain would you most like to investigate? So is there anywhere down
That
our
is a
neck
great
of the
question.
woods?
Yeah, so I am obsessed with the Pendle Witches and Lancaster Castle. And so having specialized in Salem witch trials, I have been having recurring dreams about Lancaster Castle. So I want to go there as soon as possible, and like I'm hoping to go this year.
Oh, that's brilliant. The Pendle Witches thing, because if you speak to, there's a guy called Danny Moss, and he does My
Yeah,
Haunted Projects.
yeah.
Reach out to him because they've just started investigating a farmhouse in Pendle Hill. And that would be a great location if you do get down. Have a chat with him and see what he can do for you. But then moving on as well, you've got a new book that's due to come out for sale. Ghosts of Sleepy Hollow and the Headless
Yeah,
Huntsman. Is that right?
yeah, so Ghost of Sleepy Hollow was my book last year, and it came out around Halloween last year, and that was amazing because like I having focused on Salem for so many years, and then going to a location that was based on a legend that kind of took on a life of its own. That was great. So Sleepy Hollow, it's the famous Legend of Sleepy Hollow written by Washington Irving. But people started reporting sightings of a headless horseman in Sleepy Hollow, New York. So that was like why? Because he actually never existed. So kind of going into the going into the idea, like the thought form manifestation. Like I do believe people can create ghosts, and I think that book is a perfect example
Oh,
of that.
that's great. And the thing you've just said there, you think people can create a ghost. It's
Yeah,
like I watched a documentary about a group of students, and they did a thing called what was it? The Philip
it's the Philip
experiment.
experiment. Yep.
Yeah, where they literally sat in a classroom setting with a whiteboard and they started writing down a name, a date of birth for this person. the occupation, and then they started getting like responses from a spirit that they made up.
Yeah,
Do you
Philip.
think? But yeah, yeah. But do you think that's because another spirit has watched what they've done and they've mimicked what they've said, or do you think that it's an actual spirit that they've made up and it's just appeared in front of them?
That's a good question because I do kind of look at all the different sides to it and Ghost of Sleepy Hollow. I mean, so for example, there was a Revolutionary War victim who lost his head during the Battle of White Plains. So there was actually a person that it could have been. So the Headless Horseman could have actually been a real person. However, not in Sleepy Hollow. So it happened in White Plains, which is a distance away. So I do feel that. So I did look at the idea, like, is it something else assuming the role of the Headless Horseman that people are seeing, or are people expecting to see the Headless Horseman and almost creating it? And I think I'm in the school that they're almost manifesting this entity that is assuming the role of the Headless Horseman.
Yeah, because the other thing that I thought of, especially when I saw the Philip experiment, is could this be another spirit that's confused and doesn't realize what's happened to them and they've lost their original identity? You know, say if they've died traumatically, unexpectedly, and they've not crossed over knowing who they are, and that's how they assume the Philip experiment, for example.
Yeah, I mean that I did explore that in my book too. I think a lot, and also too, like certain spirits get a lot of attention. So even at the Lizzie Borden house, if you if you're a spirit and you want attention, you're going to be like, I'm going to be Andrew Borden. You know, like it's like like that's could be going on too. It's like getting the attention. I do feel like that darker entities they're fueled by energy and fueled by fear. And so I think some of these entities may be assuming the roles of other, other well-known people, and the investigators are feeding them, are giving them their energy.
Yeah, and again, you just mentioned about the energy that we bring in to a location. So if we go in with negative energy, say that we're feeling really negative, and do spirits feed on that as well and create negative responses as well? So if you go in feeling negative or you're not feeling great, again, does that mentally impact the investigation with the spirits because of the way you're feeling? And does that leave you vulnerable to get hurt or get like we were saying possessed by certain other entities?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I had an attachment, and that was after a very long season working on the U.S. of Salem in Quincy, Massachusetts, and also giving tours in Salem. So it was Halloween season, and I was giving a lecture at this mansion in Topsfield. Didn't protect myself, and I was at a really low vibration. And so when I was at my lower vibration, that's when I basically, I mean, the show that it turned into was called Provoking Evil, but truthfully, it was accidentally provoking evil because I didn't, I didn't do it on purpose. I wasn't like,
Hmm.
Spirit, take me over. It kind of just did. It kind of hijacked me. So yeah, a low vibration definitely attracts lower vibrational entities.
And with that attachment and what you were going through, then how did you overcome that?
So it was an ordeal. I didn't know what was going on, and my friend Joni Mahan recognized the symptoms, if you will. I started going in and out of consciousness, and I had my eyes were like pupils of my eyes were changing, and then my personality changed too, and now I know I have the ability to channel. So I was channeling something and I didn't push it out. And that's what was going on. So it was almost still inside me. I don't think it was a possession, if you will. It was like a channeling that went wrong. Um,
Hmm.
so she recognized it because she went through a similar situation, reached out to a shaman who did a removal.
Wow, wow, that's great. And did it scare you then, in a way? Like you're saying, like words
Yeah,
that you didn't realize what was going on,
it
but
was
when
terrible.
people
Yeah.
and the thing is, when people were telling you, Sam, this is what was going on with you, what did it make you think, well, maybe I need to step away from doing the actual investigation side because it could be quite traumatic and it can affect you in many ways.
I did. I mean, I basically there. So what happens when you have a traumatic, like extreme haunting? It you don't want to re-traumatize. You don't want it to happen again. So
Definitely.
there is. I mean, it took me about. So my friend Joni actually knew this, and she actually brought me back out, if you will. I was so terrified to leave my home. It was a really tough. It was about 6 months for the most part, and I gradually kind of got back into it. She's like, hey, you give tours in Salem. Why don't you give a tour to my group? So almost kind of forcing me to kind of come out of my shell. So I had to kind of gradually work my way back to the paranormal field after that. But it was in 2016, so it took me about 6 months to a year to recover.
That's crazy. And did it change your way of going into investigations? Like, do you like from when you were doing that then? Do you do things sort of differently now before you start and when you finish? Like, do you do like, I know some people will do a sage session afterwards, or do you have a routine now that you sort of ground yourself? What
Yeah,
do
I
you
mean,
do for
I
yourself?
I do I do a crystal shield of protection. So it's sort of like I do it's like a crystal as opposed to a white light because I feel like white light blocks everything out, and I do like it's like a Reiki chant that I do, and it works for me. But the problem is you have to make sure that when you create a bubble around you, that you also go beneath your feet as well. I've had things kind of come um, through below, like and come from the ground. So I do that. I have protection stones. I do everything now. Like I triple protect myself.
You go in there prepared, and you've mentioned your mum a few times in what you're doing, and what's her take on it, or when she hears these sort of stories, and if your friends as well when they hear these sort of things, because a lot of people when we talk to them and say this is what we do, we go out, you know, investigating to see the truth of the paranormal. What's their take, especially when you're saying that something not so nice happened to you? What's their reactions to it?
Well, my mom is when I first started, she was scared that I was going to go down a dark path, and guess what happened? It went down a dark path. But I was like, no, mom, it's I'm just writing books. It's like I'm not going to put myself in danger. But my mom is also gifted, and because of this, it's almost like forced our family to kind of like look at our gifts, and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
my niece is gifted, my sisters are gifted, my mom is gifted, so it's in our family. And also too, like even my mother, even though she has always been wary about the paranormal, the fact that she was able to use ancestry.com and really dig into our family lineage to find the ties to to Lizzie Borden and to other people was amazing. And I'm so proud of her, to do that. And so she has contributed, she supported me, maybe not in the like, like she may not like me doing investigation,
yeah.
but I also feel that she has supported me by information. I mean, like the finding that those ties is invaluable.
It's amazing, yeah, definitely, and it does show the support. But then, what I find fascinating, because one of my questions when I've spoken to mediums, clairvoyants in the past, is I try and understand. It's a gift. It's an amazing gift with ways people use it. But is it a gift from a higher power, or like you're saying, this is something that your family have all got the same sort of similar gifts? Your niece, your mum. Is it in the genetics as well? Then why do you think certain people have the ability? Because I know a lot of people say everyone has the ability.
Right.
I don't necessarily believe that bit, but I believe there's certain people given the gift for a reason. But do you think it's something a higher power that chooses you, or is it something to and then it goes down in your bloodline to each of them? Because I've never really had anyone say my mum's this as well, my niece, and it's really like a number of family members. But what do your take there?
I mean, I think it's a number of factors. I mean, I think in my family's case specifically, I just think that that it has passed down. It passed down from my grandfather. So my grandfather, who's the connector to Lizzie Borden, like that's so I do feel it's it is passed down without whether we know it or not. And
Mm.
I think I mean, also in our family, we're all been terrified, and so like that's similar too. And terrified to the point where we shut down. It was so terrifying. Instead of like embracing it, it's been like fighting it our whole lives. Like, that's pretty much the case with everybody in my family. So I do feel like that there's genetics to it. I do think other people are. It's I don't think it's everybody has the gift, because I mean if you talk to everybody, like they're like I no I'm not psychic, or I'm not a medium at all. And but I do think if you work the muscle that you can unlock certain abilities. I do feel like remote viewing, it could be learned by you can learn remote viewing. I think that certain skills are something that can be learned.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's fantastic. Now, before we finish off, I always like to give my guests the opportunity to promote anything that they've got coming up or anything they really want to share with the viewers. So, can you just give us a bit of a shout out what you've got coming up, what people can expect, and where they can find your stuff?
So if you go to my website, sambaltrusis.com, it lists all my upcoming events. I'm pretty much booked from May 1st on for the rest of the year. So tons of events all over the US. I would love to go to the UK in this year, and I'm trying to make something happen. So we'll see what if that comes up. Currently working on a book on haunted castles of New England, and that's what I've been working on currently, and that's been so much fun to do that. But also to compare the castles of New England to the castles in Europe, which is like night and day. It's
That
sort of
that, that
like
would be amazing, yeah. And I
yeah,
think
I love it. I
one
mean, I love it.
that'd be, and if you do manage to come down in October, and you want a location, get in touch with us because we do events as well, and we have a number of events happening in October that we would love to welcome you along if you're down here and you need something to do.
Are,
You
are
know,
you are you close to Manchester, or like how what part of England you're
we're in the south, so we're in Hampshire, so it's about,
oh,
I
okay.
think, about a 3 hour drive from Manchester, or maybe just 4 hours.
It's not
But
a it's not a very large country, right? So it's like you could probably drive from the top to the bottom and like
yeah, you literally could. But yeah, so if you decide that you're coming down and you want somewhere to investigate, definitely get in touch with us. But what I will do after the show is I will pop down Sam's links. So if you do want to go and check out his website, please do. Check out his books. He's got some great books available. 18 books, as I said, and more
yeah.
coming. So definitely do check that out. But I just want to take a moment and say thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing some of the stories that you've covered and your experiences. It's been absolutely great to chat to you and get to know you and some of the stories. And thank you for answering all the questions. It's been absolutely great.
Thank you for having me on.
No, thanks so much. So I'll let you get on with your evening or afternoon because I know you've done a night shift, haven't you? So
Oh
you've just got
yeah.
a night shift.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I'm gonna go right to sleep.
so yeah, but again, thank you so much. Definitely would love to keep in touch with you, and if you do manage to get to the UK, we would definitely love to invite you along to one of our investigations and do something with you. It'll be absolutely amazing.
I would love that.
Brilliant. Well, I'll let you go on, Sam. Thank you so much, and we'll chat soon. But I'll let you go. Thanks so much, Sam.
All right, thank you. Have a good day.
Bye. Brilliant. What a great chat. Answering some of the stories that a lot of us have watched. Especially the Lizzie Borden. So we will definitely catch up with Sam in the future. We'll bring him back on in the future as well. But again, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for joining in. Some great questions and all the support you guys give. For Portal to the Paranormal, just let everyone know. We do have an investigation coming up on the 21st of March, I believe. We're heading back to Merchiston Hall and we still have some places available. So if you want to join us on an investigation, you can head to our Facebook page. The links are there, or go to portaltotheparanormal.co.uk. And you'll find all our upcoming events throughout the year. So if you do want to join us, um, have a look at what we've got planned, and we would love to see you there. But again, thank you to everyone for joining in and welcoming Sam to the show. again, another great guest, another great chat. We will be back soon. I think our next one we have coming up, we will be speaking to Jeff Bellinger about his journey through the unexplained. He has done a lot of stuff on cryptics. He's a great storyteller as well, so we're looking forward to welcome him into the show. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye. Have a lovely evening and enjoy the upcoming weekend. And we will be back very soon. Take care, everyone.